Hello. Yeah, looks like everybody's on. Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, getting over our technical difficulties. Okay, so let's have a really nice class today about sacred space and the four empowerments and how they all work together, what they're about, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I'd like to share with you today. Of course, this is a free class to kick off the fundraiser for developing the structures on the land next door to the retreat center here. So we should start off talking about Shakti Pitams. What does that mean, Shakti Pitam? Pitam means like a place, and Shakti is a power, so like a power place. How do places become power places? They are naturally formed, so nature sometimes conspires to create the most beautiful energy in a place. And then when ancient peoples would find that energy, they would go and do ceremonies there and have temples there, but they usually wouldn't live there. But that's how one type of Shakti Pitam is formed. And in India, there's many, many of these, and people go on pilgrimage tours to go around to all these different Pitams to experience that resonance experience that opens them into whatever the energy is there in that specific place. So many, many places around the world are like this. Indian tantric yoga, which became Tibetan tantric yoga, etc., turned this understanding into something very formalized and institutionalized, and created maps of territories that had esoteric subtle channels and chakras and so on. Another way that an area becomes a Shakti Pitam, excuse me, is that a great sage or a number of teachers use that place over time for teachings and attract people to that place, and it develops that energy. It becomes like a large living altar, which is like a sending receiving station from the heavens, and it develops that energy like that. There's many examples of that in history as well. So starting off with what sacred space is, that's how we can develop sacred space. And it can be obviously a combination of those two things as well. So the whole path of Mahāsiddha yoga and tantric yoga that it came from, and Taoism that it came from, etc., is that the inside and the outside are not two separate things, that they're one experience. When we work with the inside as the main cause of everything, we're at the root. That's the way it works, because we project all this reality. However, because all the reality is projected, because it comes from our essence, it therefore is also essence, either in a limited form or an unlimited form. Therefore, the outside world can also be an experience of the resonant power of essence. So we can get into a space where that resonant power of essence is so well positioned, well formed, arisen so well, we could say, that it acts like the clear mirror of our own Dharmakaya, of our own Shiva Bindu. And that space of the Shiva Bindu Dharmakaya allows just a deeper resonance within ourselves. It like mirrors for us what that openness is into presence and spaciousness. That allows us to fall back into our essence nature so much easier. So there is this confluence, there is this relationship and communication that occurs between outer sacred space and inner sacred space. And that's why people eventually, when we left animism and shamanism and people started to understand these principles more, they started to create temples. The oldest temples were Shakti Pitams that were formed naturally in nature, and they're beautiful, and they're still good, they're still viable. Of course, they're limited in time and space. So something that was very powerful for like 2,000 years or 5,000 years, formation, let's say Stonehenge or something, could completely have lost its energy at this point, because it's all subject time and space and cycles of time and space. This is what New Age people don't know and don't understand. So Shakti Pitams that are naturally formed will lose their energy over time, because that's the nature of time. It's transient phenomena. Now, when we look at this resonance between the inner and outer, that's what you want to create. That's what you want to have. So then over time, people started creating temples. And first temples were usually created right on the Shakti Pitams, the naturally forming ones. And then you get, wow, this temple architecture, this structure amplifies and projects the energy of that natural place. That's how temples were originally designed. That's why when Christianity was being forced upon the Northern European people, my ancestors, and the ancestors were like, no, we want to keep our old temples our own ways, and we're going to keep worshiping on the hill, blah, blah, blah. the Christians figured out, hey, the way to convert them is just change their temples into our churches, because they're not going to go to the churches we built that aren't on the sacred sites, that aren't on the sacred land. Very interesting, devious, and interesting way to convert people from their natural spirituality. So anyway, in our center in Thailand, we built 2 beautiful temples for that reason. And I purchased that land because it had fantastic spatial requirements, great vastu, we call it in Indian terminology, in Sanskrit. In other words, the bodies of water sloped downhill to the northeast, all this perfect stuff. Sun rose in the east, right into the land, through the mountains, through the dragon's back. It was just gorgeous. Same way here in Costa Rica now at this center, we're running this crowdfunding fundraiser to try to have people invest and donate into creating some structures here. Not very big, elaborate structures, but there is that sense that we want to have that resonance again between structure, space, land, and the individual to bring out what we need. And today, I'm teaching right now in the main teaching shrine room of the center here in Costa Rica. And we can sit 20 people, 22 people close to each other, but you couldn't do any physical practice. And even doing a ritual or ceremony would be difficult, which is, again, a physical practice. And conscious embodiment, or the physical practices of the Mahāsiddha path, are very important, very integral to what we do. So if we have body, speech, and mind as the 3 doorways to enter for our practice, and the 3 doorways that need to be fused together to have true realization as a Mahāsiddha. Remember, we don't have just realization in the mind, we're fully embodied in realization through the Mahāsiddha path. So if we're going to have body, speech, and mind, we got to bring the body along. And to bring the body along, we need more of an area where we can work with more than 3 people at a time, because in this space, 3 or 4 people max is all you're going to work with inside, So we're creating this sacred space by trying to acquire the land next door, and then we would then build some structures on it. The structures would be an outdoor, open-aired, but roofed, of course, pavilion for conscious embodiment practices. So a big shrine and an open floor, possibly a roof. If there's enough money to create 2 stories, the roof was strong, we could have open air practice on top, sky gazing, all those things that are so important for our tradition. And then also spread around that very small piece of land, but just strategically placed, would be some dark retreat huts, 1 or 2 hut for people doing long meditation retreat, but not in the dark. And I plan a stupa, a small stupa, not such a big one, a chorten in Tibetan, stupa in Sanskrit. And then the rest would be gardens for growing the food for all of us, which is what we really need to. So that's the plan. And the idea is that we would be able to have a resonance built up from using this for conscious embodiment practices over a period of time. We'd have a resonance built up between us and this beautiful structure. And the way it would look out towards the ocean through a tree that's like the avatar tree, a massive tree looking through its branches to the ocean, just sets up a magical kind of feeling. Like in front of you, there's nothing but jungle and then ocean. Gorgeous. So that's how I'd orient and position it to face that way. So it'd be really pretty. So we would have then a space, and this is what I think is so important, for allowing the embodiments, the empowerments to take place, to land. Where would it land, right? A space where you could enter your small sense of time and space, your body, your vastu, could enter into the greater vastu, this greater space, and receive that transmission, receive that empowerment in the body practice sense as well. So I thought today, let me teach you a little bit about sacred space, empowerments, and this kind of thing. So without further ado, let's discuss then, what are the 4 empowerments? You'll see different descriptions of them in different traditions, but in general, all the traditions of non-dual meditation and yoga have this idea that to practice something, you should be empowered. You should be empowered with that practice. You should be empowered with the energy of it, the consciousness of it, the understanding of it, the intellectual comprehension of it, the tools you'll need, and so forth. So let's explain what this is. An empowerment, or an abhishekam in Sanskrit, is to receive permission to practice that secret practice, right? Is to receive the energetic connection to the blessing power of the beings who have realized their true nature, who have also perfected that practice. That's extremely important. That's what you don't get with books, and you don't get with online courses. Again, why we want to do it in person. when Sukalia and I put the pedagogy together for the school and how we were going to, for the system that we have, Trika Mahāsiddha Yoga, and how we were going to run it, we said, look, everything could be taught online, but then you would lose so much of the value and it wouldn't work. So we're only going to teach the most basic things online that can be communicated this way. The rest you've got to come in person for. And I know how that cuts our income, and I know how it cuts the availability to people all around the world, but it doesn't matter, because the most important thing is that the integrity of the system is being transmitted, right? I mean, we've had a whole bunch of people approach us to sell our stuff online, to let them be our manager, their company will put all that. And we said, no, we're just not interested. We could have made a bigger space for people to come in person here, like that could hold 100 instead in the shrine room. But we said, no, the shrine room is big enough to have 20, 22. And usually we cap trainings at 12, So why? We want the quality. Why? Not to be elitist, not so we can charge more, or whatever people will accuse of in the future, I'm sure. But because in the intimacy of that transmission space, where the resonance of the macro and the micro come together, it has to happen in person. And it has to happen within certain numbers. Like one of my favorite lamas who passed away fairly recently, Namkhai Norbu, was doing international live webcast transmissions of Nature of Mind. He was experimenting. And I'm not sure if it was successful or not, to be honest. It should be beyond space and time, but no one's living at that absolute level. So I'm not really sure it worked, to be honest. I'm not putting him down. I love the man. He was fantastic. He helped me a lot. But I'm not sure it worked. My own personal opinion is that it probably doesn't work. And if it does work, you were meant to have it happen anyway. And you could have walked out and picked up the Sunday morning newspaper and got that transmission. So I think you got to be in person. I think that's a really important thing to understand. So as we go through these components of the 4 empowerments, you got to remember that what we're trying to do is impress upon your psychic continuum in the body, in the speech and the energy body, and in the mind, right? And we're trying to make that deep impression. So there's usually some main components of empowerments that should all be there. If it's a full component, a full empowerment. And what I mean is I'll talk to somebody about their practice. They'll say, oh, can you guide my practice? And I'll say, okay, I can guide your practice, but we have to start from scratch because I don't know what you did for the past 20 years and what you did. Oh, I did all this different stuff. And they'll list out all this stuff. And I'll say, yeah, that's great, but I really don't know what you received. No, I just told you, but really you haven't told me because I don't really know what empowerments you really received. What does that mean? Well, when you go to a guru in India or when you go to a lama, at least in the Tibetan tradition now, it's still organized around these empowerments. In India, it's hit or miss whether you're going to get someone even teaching who understands that you have to have each one of these empowerments in place to have the full experience. Really old traditional teachers do, and the format of the ceremonies take all this into account. But for modern ones, I don't know, hit or miss. But in Tibet, it's still preserved. But the question with the Tibetan lamas is, are they going to give you the full transmission, the full empowerment? And usually the answer is no. To be quite honest, I've been around the block. I'm 58 and a half, and I've been training with Tibetans since my late 20s. And, they like to keep their stuff to themselves. There's a lot of xenophobia there. Unfortunately, they'll say, no, all beings are equal, blah, blah, blah. But I've seen many, many worthy non-Tibetans not receive what they really should be receiving in ceremony and so on. So let's look at this. So you know what a proper empowerment should have, so you have the full empowerment. Okay. First is the initiation, which is the doorway key to get in to experience anything. Now, when you're talking about the highest level absolute teachings, like your essence, and there's nothing else you need to do but relax and be in your essence, that doesn't need this fourfold process of empowerment. It doesn't. But the thing they don't tell you is that there's a lot of teachers running around the world today saying, I'm just going to give you these non-dual teachings. They're from the highest level, so you don't need any ceremonies or anything. Well, what these teachers themselves don't know, because they haven't done the work, is that if you don't do all the work behind it, you can't relax into it. You're not going to be able to receive it. And that sounds very absolute, but that's true. That's just the truth. The people who are able to say, okay, I don't need these 4 levels of empowerment, body, speech, mind, and mystic, that I can just relax into it and receive it, means they've already got have already developed a very high level of base experience, right? But for everybody else who's on the way, that's very few people, by the way, who have that level developed. For all of us who are on the way, we need to receive the empowerment as much as we can, as many times as we can, in as many components of ourselves as we can: body, speech, mind, and our mystical connection to essence. So in the initiation, you're getting access. So initiation says you have access to this teaching. You have access to this, this knowledge, basically. And the body part of the ceremony will often involve you imbibing sacred liquids, sacred foods, things that were blessed in the ceremony that symbolize and carry the embodiment, the empowerment, the transmission of that teaching into the physical body, right? Like when I had an Acharya Abhishekam, my guru fed me in my mouth from his own hand. So that was without a doubt something that impressed my psychic continuum. I barely had contact with him, and all of a sudden at this ceremony, he's feeding me like a mother would feed a baby. And you go, wow, that's really intimate and beautiful. And that really made a definite impression in my mental continuum, my energetic continuum, right? So this is what this is all about, samskaras, making deep psychic impressions in our continuum. So along with the body initiation, when you get initiated into a practice or into whatever you're getting into, but here I'm talking about getting practices and levels of consciousness, whatever. If you're initiated into this, the body will receive food, may receive touch in certain ways on marma points. Of course, mantras are going on as well, but we're activating the body here. You may wear a certain garment, a hat, whatever. May wear certain things, jewelries or whatever. You may be told to hold a certain posture. So now you're really consciously embodying that transmission in some way. There are ritual gestures that you may need to make or that are done in front of you or on you. This is part of the body thing, as well as dance. There can be dance involved. So there are many ways that the body receives the empowerment in a real initiation. And if they're not there, to me, it's not a real initiation on the relative level. You can say, oh, I received it on the absolute level from the ethers. Good luck with that, basically. That's good. If you're a very high level practitioner, some good will come of that, no doubt. But for the full powered experience, you need the body. Okay, speech. Next, body, speech, and mind. Speech, number 2. Speech is speaking of the sacred mantras. So most of these empowerments will involve mantras as an energy vehicle. Sometimes they don't. Higher level ones, not necessarily higher, that's not true, because higher level ones will contain mantra as well sometimes. Let's say there's another way to transmit the energy which speech represents, which mantra represents. That can be done by gestures, can be done eye to eye, can be done breath to breath, can be done not even by mantras, but by making sounds. But anyway, that's the full spectrum of the way that can occur in the transmission. But it's not done by, let's say, it's done consciously. It's choreographed. It's part of it, right? So there are verses that you may read or be read to. There is mantras that you may have to speak or be spoken to, and you receive the energy of the ceremony. That's important in the initiation. The mind in the initiation part of this 4-part empowerment we're talking about here, first part is initiation. The mind is activated or receives the impression through looking at icons. So sometimes an icon will be brought in front of your face, or sometimes you're sat on top of a very big mandala that's created in colored sand or in colored rice or colored rice flour. Beautiful big yantras or mandalas are there. You're sat right in it, right? Or you're looking at a tanka or a painting of a deity or a mandala that has that energy that you're receiving that day, right? That kind of thing. Or the teacher takes on the bhava of that deity and transmits to you that way. That's a very powerful tantric way of doing it too. Then the body, speech, and mind come all together because the deity is sitting right in front of you. If it's a deity transmission, there's many different types of initiation ceremonies that empowerment involve, sometimes into states of consciousness, sometimes with a deity that represents the state of consciousness, and so on, okay? The next type of empowerment that has to be there for it to be a full empowerment experience in your body is to receive a text through listening to the text being chanted to you, or to receive a memorized oral teaching. But you're receiving it orally. You're listening, You're in a big open state. You're just sitting there, and the Lama, the Guru, they will read to you what it is that you're supposed to take in. And that's a very important part of the transmission of the empowerment. A lot of modern students poo-poo this and just totally devalue it, saying it's not important at all. I'm going to have the book anyway. Why I need my old teacher to read it to me? They don't understand. Think about it this way. If this teaching, whether a deity practice or whether a teaching on your essence and meditation practice, whatever, was received directly from essence, and that came to the seer of that teaching. The receiver is called a seer, usually rishis or great tantric masters or whatever. And they receive that vidya shakti, that quantum of energy power, wisdom energy power. Then they have it in them and they write it down. Let's say for a written text version, they write it down. Now, that conversion of that energy that was visual and received powerfully, direct and visual, became converted to the consciousness energy of the person, the sage who received it. She then writes it down. It's now converted into writing. But there's no diminution in the energy as it comes down. And now that text is then used by that master to transmit to their students. So she's reading it and chanting it to them, and they're like, whoa, and they're feeling that power. And then all the rest, it's in the ceremony, the initiation part, being given all the ceremonial steps that are taken to prove that you have access to it, to prepare the body mind, not only to gain permission to get into this practice, but to prepare the body mind speech to actually receive the power of the practice, which is happening now in the part where she's reading it to you, right? In this way. So you're receiving that. And now you're directly connected to the original transmission. And if that person becomes a Vidyadhara, someone who achieves the attainment of that experience and then passes it on again, the same thing happens. So we shouldn't say, oh, the master didn't give me the reading initiation, but it doesn't matter. It does. It really does matter that they read it with you, that they translated it, transmitted it to you through chanting or praying or reading. When I was with Holiness, my Bumpo Lama, that I was training with before he passed away. I was his student for a number of years in the physical form. And he did reading transmission of so many texts to me. And here I was pretty much coming from an oral practice tradition, didn't really care about text much, but he read so many. And he said, I want you to have these because basically I'm not going to be around forever. And if this is planted in you with this reading, then okay, great. And he even wanted me to record some of them on video. So we recorded some on video too, because some people said, oh, you couldn't have trained with the greatest Dzogchen master of the Bun. Arguably it's Lopan Tenzin Namdak and Holiness were the greatest teachers at the time for Dzogchen and the Bun. Not to disrespect any of the other great lamas out there who are teaching that way too, but these are very public figures who everybody knows are the standard reference points for Dzogchen and Bun in general. And they'd say things like, people will say, oh, you couldn't have received, you didn't study with him. He said, I want you to have it on video to show that you received these empowerments of the 21 nails, of the Kalung Gyatso, and da-da-da. Okay. So this is a very important type of thing if you're into text tradition. That's why I say with scholars out there today teaching text stuff, Tibetan, Sanskrit, whatever, and they didn't have a guru who actually chanted that whole text to them, that's incomplete. That's a broken transmission. No matter what they tell you, it's a broken transmission, right? So this is a very important thing. Now, the same goes for the oral teachings. So when I sat there and listened to the oral teachings, they'd say something like, okay, listen up now. And they'd give out these set of teachings, and I would then go over it with them. And I knew there were sets of teachings. Someone wrote recently on some thread on some Facebook group somewhere asking me, oh, it's so easy to say this is an oral teaching tradition and to say you have some package of knowledge because no one can check it, no one can verify because it's not a book. I'm like, yeah, I get it. That's a very good argument against us, but I don't really care because that person's obviously painfully in samsara and just a troll, and I'm quite happy with life, so it's okay. But it's not like that. It's not like we're making something up amorphously. These are set cycles of oral teachings, and they have set components. And you go over them with the teacher many times to make sure you're getting each one of the components. And that's why when I give you a teaching and you sit there and you go, wow, where's this written down? This is what happens all the time in our group and public. I said, nowhere. I'm writing it now. I'm getting students to help me write them down now because these oral teachings, I think they should come into book form now. Every sacred text was originally an oral teaching. a visionary or oral teaching given for a while, and then eventually committed to writing. So it's natural anyway. So we're going to write these down. But it's very important to understand that these oral teachings we're giving that you see in the preliminary practice program of Trika Mahāsiddha Yoga and in the Trika Mahāsiddha Yoga Foundation practice program, Kundalini Hatha Yoga, these are cycles of teaching that are complete, that contain everything. And we know because I went back and would clarify, and make sure what was missing was added. If I was missing something, what I didn't understand was corrected, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so this is the listening. Basically, the key is listening. Whether it's an oral tradition and teachers giving it to you through verbal to your ear, like you see Tankas of Milarepa, he's like this. Because they really pride themselves on the fact that they're the whispered tradition. You know, it's whispered into one from the master to the student, and that student becomes master whisper to the student. It's beautiful. That's a huge oral practice tradition called Kagyu, Karma Kagyu, Drukpa Kagyu in Tibetan Buddhism. And there they really do favor the oral. It's in their tankas of their great master, Milarepa, the Yogin. Okay, but they have text, of course, but this is important to receive this speaking transmission. So that part has to happen, receive the speaking transmission or hearing it. Then the third empowerment or abhishekam that has to happen is that the adept, the vidyadhara, the person who contains the power of that transmission they're going to give you, explains the practice or explains the view teaching from the text or both in great detail. So if the text is about the path, it may be view, method, fruit, explain the whole thing. If the text is about a practice, if the oral teaching is about a meditation, whatever the cycle is, they have to explain it in great detail. That's considered to be like the third empowerment. In that explanation, you get all the real juicy pointing out instructions. So as the teacher is teaching you that text or teaching you that practice, that oral transmission, they move into a deeper space where they're in the space of the fruit of that experience. This is what's supposed to happen. They move into the deeper experience of the fruit of the practice, and then they can give you the pointing out instructions, the key, lock and key kind of instructions that can help you open up into what the real fruit of that practice is. You can feel it and taste it a little bit. You know, it's like you never had mango, let's do the land here. You never had a mango, a mangosteen, a jackfruit, a papaya, all the stuff we have grown here, the coconuts. And I'm trying to describe mango to you. I can get close to you sensing a range, but you don't know what it is. But if I lay them all out and I say, taste this one, that's mango. Now you know for sure. You've been given the experience of what it is, right? So in the explanation level of Abhishekam, of empowerment, the teacher is trying to give you the pointing out instructions that point you directly into the fruit of the experience during this actual empowerment, one of the four empowerments, okay? And that obviously takes a person who has the fruit of that practice or text or whatever in them. It means they have had to do the practices and they have had to receive it from teachers before them. Everybody loves to point to Abhinavagupta's Tantra Loka. I think it's chapter 4 or 5, where he talks about the different kind of gurus that are out there available. And he talks about a type of guru that is self-arisen, completely self-arisen, absolutely relaxing in the natural state. So they can perform every ceremony, every empowerment, teach any text, whatever they want to do without having any training. Except he goes on later to explain, but even if you're self-arisen, you have to still keep studying, right? Why? Because they don't know how to do anything. They could be self-arisen in a natural state, but they don't understand how any of this works. So they really can't teach it effectively. So, and I think we should be extremely cautious today in applying the idea that a self-arisen guru, like that they're all over the place, that they're accessible everywhere, or that you could be one, that I could be one. It's extreme hubris, it's extreme pride to the extreme extent. All because nobody wants to be a student anymore and do the hard work, because we see spiritual work as some kind of great attainment that everybody should have access to and able to complete without any difficulty. I don't know why we see that, but we think that. But this is not true. And what I find interesting is people want to quote Abhinavagupta's text about this all the time to support that they're a self-arisen guru. A lot of scholars like to be like, oh, I'm self-arisen, I'm so connected, you know. And I know all the texts and I'll wow you with it now. Well, really, Abhinavagupta was way smarter than you. How many gurus did he have? Right. He had multiple gurus. And he said one guru trumped them all, and that's who his Satguru was. And he credits him for giving him his full realization, full practice. And Abhinavagupta did the practices. He never said he was self-arisen, right? So he's being philosophically correct and complete by including the idea that you can be a self-arisen guru and describing the powers of them, which are phenomenal. I mean, if you see a self-arisen guru by Abhinavagupta's description, you're going to know it. You're going to know it, man, because they're so realized. We haven't had people walking around the planet like that in a long time. So let's get that one out of our mind. Let's be grounded and real. I don't care what anybody else wants to do out there for spirituality, but in the transmission of the traditions I was given, you got to work it. And here we have a huge problem between Tibetans and Indians. And I'll say it again. Indian modern tradition, once you're realized, it's done. I'm a big fat Mahaguru. I sit around telling you, explaining the whole universe to you. I don't have to practice anymore, and I don't have to say anything that makes sense anymore. And you just come and worship me. And if you hang around long enough, you're just going to get realized and you're going to die in a state of exaltation. That doesn't happen. That's just total crap. It's a total dishevelment of the real system of Mahāsiddha yoga, tantric yoga, any of the systems. The example we want to follow is the example of the Tibetans. The teachers get to very high levels of realization, but they still do practice. They still practice. They still do foundation practices. They still teach and write. They don't just sit around like, I'm God now. It's because of a different view, very different view running it. So they're all non-dual practices of yoga meditation, but the Indians, the Shaivists, that just got lost a long time ago. And now everybody wants to get to the place where they're this self-realized being, like an object, like a goal, instead of understanding the path is infinite. And then that's what happens. Now, if we still had the Shaktipitams, if we still had these great temples and great natural formations where great masters still stayed, you could go there and you could reference these great masters and they'd still be in these systems. But all that broke down. That's why I'm giving this talk today about sacred space and the four empowerments. So we want to bring it back. We're trying to bring back the good stuff and leave out the stuff that was no good, that we didn't need anymore. Okay. So, after the hearing of the text or hearing of the oral teaching being chanted to you, prayed to you, read to you, then there's the explanation in great detail. That's the third step, is the explanation, where the key points come out in the state of realization of the master. And hopefully some of that rubs off and we get some pointing, a little bit more direction pointing us to where we need to go. Then we get to the mystical. The fourth is there's a mystical aspect of the empowerments. You need 4 to make it all work. And the mystical aspect is that connection to the ancients, directly connection to the ancient masters' minds. These great women and men that existed in this state of realization, guess what? They're still ever present. They're right there, right? But we have to have that environment created through these formats that are very efficacious, very efficient at producing the connection to those masters' minds, right? It prepares us mostly and opens us to receive it. And then the teacher, by dialoguing with the teacher after these 4 empowerments, including the mystical connection, dialogue, and the teacher says, yeah, you did, you received it, I get it. It's been 3 months of us dialoguing this, or 3 years of us dialoguing this. You're going away and practice on the teaching, come back, and we're dialoguing. It's obvious you received that transmission. And without that kind of thing happening, this is really important now. This research and development, the R&D aspect. You receive all these 4, but still one thing left to do, which again leaves out the scholars who don't have teachers. Now, some scholars say, oh, I had a guru, I hung out with this teacher and that, but you didn't do training. You didn't go back and get checked. And the teacher didn't give you the bop on the head. People are like, oh, they said I could teach now. If I had a nickel for every time a lama or a guru said I should go out and teach something, I'd be wealthy. It has to be accompanied by the proper supportive experiences to really be an authorized teacher in that sense, right? If you want to call yourself a teacher, who cares? Now, so where are we going? The mystical empowerment's the last of the 4 empowerments. And then, right, there's this way that you receive this, but the very next step is you have to go out and you have to practice it for a number of weeks, months, or years. Then you go back and check your realization. That process of going out, practicing, coming back and checking with the teacher who gave you that transmission until it's confirmed that you now resemble the teacher's knowledge and experience, your knowledge and experience are same, confirmed, you got it. That is really crucial. So that is another aspect of the empowerment. They might as well call that the fifth aspect of the empowerment. They don't. They say there's only 4 aspects: body, speech, mind, and mystical, or the physical stuff, the initiation, then the reading or speaking transmission, and then the explanation and the mystical. But they might as well add this 5th one because it's really true. So again, to reiterate, when this type of thing happens in a sacred space, in a dedicated space, the impression on the psychic body is very deep, is very strong, is very powerful. Like here in the shrine room. So on the altar, we have a vase that His Holiness Lungta Tempe Nima, my teacher, did 365 ceremonies on. There were only 108 produced, and they were given out to the main bun centers in the world that he's affiliated with. So like that has a tremendous resonance power for us here, and really access something that we always tap into. We have body parts and liquid parts of Rainbow Light Body Masters from many traditions, and also great realized masters that were stage 9, 10, 11, not even light body, just really high up. So we have that on the altar, and we give it out during ceremonies to empower the body again, right? So there's all this stuff that's sitting here resonating tremendous power. I could go on and on with the list. We have so many of these objects that are imbued with this essence power. But more importantly, when you're sitting with them, is to make you remember how amazing it is to be in that transmission environment, to receive that initiation of space of your body, the body temple, to hold all this. Yeshit Sogil was a lady who had tremendous realization, and she was around in the 800s. She had a famous guru named Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche, he was known as too. So he had this Sanskrit name, and she said something really amazing. Enlightenment arises from within the body, or it does not arise at all. Unless the body is realized as the perfect crucible for liberation, freedom from conditioned existence remains only an imaginary dream. And why do I bring this up now? Because all teaching, all practice, whether oral, textual, whatever, the realization and the fruit of it is always contained in a body. We have the teaching of the Trikaya, right? The 3 bodies. Dharmakaya of space, Sambhogakaya of virtuous energy, potential energies, Nirmanakaya, the physical manifestation of samsara and nirvana in individuality. All 3 are one. It shows us that in the Mahāsiddha yoga tradition, as in Dzogchen, as in Vajrayana, as in Shaivism, as in Shaktism, as in Taoism, the body is not an object. It's not like a box of tissues. Put a tissue in, you pull a tissue out. It's not that. The body is a container, a consciousness, a conscious field, a kshetrajna, a field of awareness. But a field of awareness that is my field of awareness, that is my self-arising wisdom nature, not yours, right? They're all different, but we have the same base, but we're all different experiences of it. And that's what's happening. So our body then, our consciousness, our continuum, the connection to the base is always what it is. But everything else, including our physical body, our Nirmanakaya, must be manifested in its highest degree possible and is a container for all of these empowerments. And when your container is brought into the sacred space container of a temple or a shrine, or the one we're hoping to build next door, the stupa, the teaching platform, that then is a deeper impression, a stronger impression on your own space, sacred space of the body as the conduit and the holder of this empowerment, right? The learning environment is an extension of the body, basically. So the samskara we're trying to form, the samskara that goes deep in, is the samskara of essence nature through these 4 empowerments, which we are giving every time we give a total empowerment here, right? And the appropriate space encourages an expansion of our consciousness and our mind. That's why, we could probably put up a structure for $10,000 or $20,000 next door, but it wouldn't be as evoking of an expansion of essence and mind. We're not going to spend a lot of money on it, but we're going to make sure that the architecture is beautiful in a natural way, but also helps the energy open of the practitioner who's there for that reason. And this is also why conscious embodiment practice is so essential in the non-dual meditation yoga tradition. So again, where the scholars fall short. It's super important that we know how to embody it, just the way Yeshe Tsogyal said, if you don't have a full realization for the body, it's not full realization. Now, does it mean that if someone's sick or someone's debilitated and they can't practice physical hatha yoga, that they can't get conscious embodiment? Not at all. Absolutely not at all. I am fond of telling the story how I taught my grandmother yoga. She could barely move, but I just taught her how to move her fingers, timing it with her breath and her consciousness. And she had huge changes, tremendous differences in her experience, really awakenings, actually. It was quite amazing. So it's important that the body is brought along and that we do the yogas, but you don't have to be perfectly healthy or powerful. It's the principles of conscious embodiment that matter, to receive those and to work those for a certain amount of time a day. Even if you're sitting in a wheelchair, you can work it. And then all the integration time, the rest of the day, you can work as well, right? So basically, in a nutshell, we must be fully present to receive, to fully receive and to ripen fully in the experience. We have to be fully present. And that's why making a center for the physical practices and to have a better place for resonance, a resonance between the physical being of the individual consciousness and the larger consciousness is so important. And especially in Costa Rica here, I love it because you're encased in a beautiful sky that's on top of the structure itself and an infinite ocean. It looks infinite to us anyway. And this is what makes it all seem to open so much for us down here and get so expansive. So anyway, this is a short discussion of the importance of the four empowerments to be received from your lamas or gurus or daosha. Daosha is a word for Taoist teachers. And I hope you understand why that's important. And I hope you understand now the sacred space and how that influences and works with your individual space. And I really hope we get this thing built. And over time, from people coming here for 10, 20 years, it develops its own power as a Shaktipitam. Already people are coming for retreats and staying in the unit that we have and receiving private instruction or doing a solo retreat on their own, self-guided from our system. And it's already starting to develop that vibe. So I hope it just continues. And I'm planting, as you see on the Facebook group, I'm planting all kinds of food trees so we can get our own food. So hopefully that all continues nicely as well. Now, if there's questions on this topic, we can start to handle some of those questions. Let me see. Would I be scrolling them here, honey? Let me see. It doesn't scroll. Why doesn't it ever scroll for me? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so if anybody has a question or a comment to work off of on this topic, it's okay if you don't. If you do, send it in now and we can have a chat about it. How should we go about empowering our home shrine? Okay, how should you go about empowering your home shrine? Christoph asks. Well, that's a very, very good question. Empowering it, right? So you want to make it more powerful. Number one is the room where you have your shrine, try not to do any bad activities there, any lower energy vibration activities there, right? Like not bad, let's take away the word bad. Don't do business there. Don't do business in front of your shrine or your altar, right? That kind of thing. Don't try to seduce your date in front of your shrine or altar, any of that kind of stuff. Try to keep the shrine altar area really separate in that sense of creating that sacred space physically. So one time I had a very small space. I lived in like smaller than this room, actually. My whole apartment was like half of this room. And I had a altar, a shrine in the corner. And I put a string up across it with curtain, just some cheap sheer curtain I found. And I would open it up, sit for practice, close it up again. And it really created that separation in my mind that's so important. So first thing is try to make it any way you can, some kind of separate space that's, worthy of empowerment, holding empowerment. If you have sacred objects, obviously you put them there. If you got them blessed, it's even more. But really you empower it by doing your ceremonies there, doing your practice there every day, and invoking and putting the icons of essence there and making it that separate sacred space. Of course, it's always great when another teacher in the lineage or a high-ranking priest or somebody comes and does ceremony there or gives a teaching there. It's a great boon if we get a teacher to come and teach in our house or something to our friends, that kind of thing. Because there is a psychic impression on the space and on the people. So over time, it could happen like that. That's some ways you can empowerment. And mostly do your practice there from a really good-hearted intention, Christoph, and that would be the best way you can empower it and keep it and pay attention to maintaining its integrity, right? Like I said, not mixing it with lower energies. Magda, can you again explain the two ways? I got to get it closer to me. Can you again explain the two ways how a power place gets made or achieved? I understood, but I would like you to go thoroughly deeper into this matter. Oh, okay. I don't know if I can go deeper. It's kind of simple. One way is that nature forms this situation. So when I was way back in my early tantric shamanism era, I was practicing tantra for the first time. It was my first few years as a tantric disciple of my guru. And I was still working with shamanism that I'd been working with since I was a kid. And I met somebody who grew up in Brittany in France. And he told me, he's from a very famous boat building family. And he told me all about their druids he grew up with. And I said, druids, that's fascinating. Long story short, I ended up going to France with him and researching these druids. Sure enough, there they are. They're not in public. They don't wear sheets. They don't publish books. They don't run workshops. But there's a whole bunch of them. They practice in private. They teach in private. They're out in the little village, a little 500-year-old village. I was so happy to meet them. And they were too busy to teach me personally, so they had students. They were testing me out anyway. They had students who brought me out into the woods to show me their sacred veys. We call vey in Scandinavian. So which is a natural area of nature that was produced in a very beautiful way, like a natural open round area, a stand of trees that created a round area or a bluff or something like that. So they took us out there and showed us their most sacred area, or they said it was, who knows, they probably have a secret one, more sacred. But it was so beautiful. It was a beautiful open stand of trees. It looked like no one had ever cut it down to make the space. It looked like it had been used forever. And there were standing stones around, not the ones that were positioned, but they were naturally formed. There were the tall menhirs in France, they call, that go from, all the ley lines on the land. Those are quite new, actually. These were very old, natural formed. And man, you could really feel the energy. I mean, really feel the energy, right? I'm not a person who falls for things very easily. And I was sitting on some of these rocks, they told us to lay on one rock, sit on another rock, stand by this tree. And it was phenomenal. So you could really feel it. So this is one way that essence comes into this dimension naturally through formations. And I think it's beautiful. And as we get more civilized, this level of the teaching is being done away with. It's being forgotten. It's disappearing. And I think it's really sad because these are where natural types of spirits that aid the Dharma can accumulate the same way bad stuff can accumulate in other areas naturally as well, like inhibiting bad spirits and ghosts and so on are attracted to different kind of environments and so on. So we were in the good stuff, So this is how one way, Magda, that it happens, that it arises naturally. People start to recognize it over time, have mystical experiences there, have deeper meditations there, go to use it more. And then it gets that second approach where people go to a place and make it stronger. And maybe the place was just a normal house in a row house development in Mumbai, India, but some sage was there, living there. And people went there so much and did so much sadhana there with him or her that it turned into a sacred place. That's another way it can turn into a sacred place, right? You're using it so much. You're developing so much core energy there of essence that it kind of opens up a wedge of the heavens and it becomes this conduit for essence energy coming into this plane. So these are the two ways they work. I don't know if that's deep enough for you, but I love it. And I used to take students on pilgrimage tours all the time. I'm really waiting to take people to Europe. That's one I'm really waiting on. I really want to get that going. We were starting to get into planning mode of it about a year before COVID hit. And now the pandemic is here. We'll see if it comes off, if we can do it in the future. But I love to take people on these tours where they can sit in these sacred power places. I want to do it in India too. Everybody's so used to going to the temples. Temples can get you high, yeah, but there's so much going on at these temples all the time. A lot of times you miss it. You miss the real subtle energy because priests are screaming and taking money from people, and dogs are running around, and thieves are there, and beggars. It's just like it's a zoo, it's a circus. The places I tend to take people are the places that I've gone to do practice retreats, which are extremely serene and extremely beautiful nature-wise and loaded with this Shakti. So I'm going to do that again if I can stay healthy long enough and we're allowed to travel again someday. Hopefully that helped you for now, Magda, understand it a bit deeper. If there's more you want to know about it, then please just let me know while we're still on here. Hello, Rodrigo. Dragonfly Mental Health. This is Wendy. Are there teachings about purifying sacred or practice space at your home before you install or build? Yeah, there's a big science of it, actually. Like before the house and the temple were built in Thailand, we ran really big ceremonies. And they're really big. And you run a big ceremony to clear the land of all negative spirits and nagas and whatever. And you have to appease the local gods. These are unenlightened, local small gods, especially if there are large geographic features nearby, a lake, a raging river, a waterfall, a big mountain, a volcano, a big valley. These huge areas get deities associated with them. You could say they're the same thing. One's anthropomorphizing the energy. It doesn't matter. But we run big ceremonies to connect and communicate with them, to get them on side to help with the process of presenting the Dharma in that sacred space. So on a small level, you can do that as well in your own purifying sacred space at your home before you install it. So you can run a ceremony that clears all the negative energy. Let's say your house wasn't owned by you. Someone else built it. Who knows what went on in that house before you were there? Those imprints of energy are in that house. It's why I really don't like to stay at bad hotels, cheaper hotels, that could really attract drug addicts and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to deal with it. So I try to go to the best hotels and try to, when I get in there, set up an altar and do mantras and put some incense and so on. Same thing at home. But if you have the opportunity to build your own house, then you can make the plans yourself, do the ceremony on the land before the groundbreaking starts. There should be a groundbreaking ceremony. Then there should be the land blessing ceremony that continues all through the phases of building. At certain phases of the construction, more ceremonies are done, just like when a mother gets pregnant, So first there are ceremonies to protect her and make her fertile. Then there are ceremonies to protect the fetus once it's inside of her, the conceptus. Then there are ceremonies when it's born to protect it as it's growing, the baby, right? The child. Same way it happens with sacred spaces. And then so depending your situation, Wendy, you want to do as much purification ceremony as possible. Now, let me give a good hint actually here for everybody who asked about this. I think it was Christoph so far and Wendy and anybody else. Burning of incense a lot for the first year when you're in a new place is really good to do. And then after that initial fumigation and prayers, maybe every 3 years you do another cycle of it for like a whole month solid. And you spend some good money on it, but it's really worth it. You want to burn cedar, cypress, sandal. These are the really great scents of incense that you just want to have that smoke filling the space as much as possible. Not giving you lung disease or anything, but you could have windows open, but you want to have it filling as much as possible. And you want to do your purification chants and prayers, which I think you've learned plenty of times with us, for the 5 elements and for the inner and outer pranas and for the directions and so forth. You want to do that in the Vastu Homa, the ceremony, the fire ceremony for the directional deities and the energies of the good enlightened deities to come. You want to do that kind of stuff. And then you set up your altar and then you do it all. It's really beautiful. That's really the best way to do it. Then you empower it. Well, if you can't do all the ceremony stuff, you don't know how, you can't get priests, you can't afford it. If you can just afford cypress, cedar, sandalwood, these woods, these 3 woods especially the cedar and cypress in the beginning, burn them regularly at the altar. Maybe you light it 4 or 5 times a day where it's always filling up the air with the smoke, and say your purification prayers and ring your bell. You will do a lot to clear the negative space, especially if you visualize like a blue hung bindu in your heart, sending out blue hungs, filling space and taking away all demons, or ringing with the blue fire inside of the crystal pyramid, diamond. I think I've taught that to you before too. That was in foundation practice, maybe, I think, or yogi to yogi. Anyway, those ways are ways that you can do it, okay? Before you install or build. Andrew, I feel alone in practice in my community. I feel like having a small group to practice with would be empowering. Do you have words to develop a local kula? Yeah, I mean, you try to get people that are like-minded as much as you, that are of good intent, good intention. It's good if you're all from the same lineage and tradition, because it just makes it easier to practice together. If you're not, it makes it a little bit difficult. But there are things that you could do with the community if they don't know anything or want to do some practice that Andrew, by having practiced with me, learned from me online. Mainly here I'm pointing to the foundation practice, right? You're not teaching the foundation practice. They should go through the foundation practice course online, because they should have the direct transmission of the teaching, because you're not an authorized instructor or acharya. But to do it together is public open access. And I do want people to do it, enjoy it together, great. And sitting silently in meditation after it's finished, everybody can meditate and everybody can help each other get better at meditation. No one is saying they're representing Trika Mahāsiddha yoga there. So you could do like that. That'd be a great way to build community power. And then maybe you have a meal after once a month or something, or, so there's a lot of different ways you could do it. Yeah, you can go through the preliminary contemplations together. For people that have done prelims, you can do all those contemplations. Yeah. So that's the idea. Can I talk about pilgrimages? I think that might have come in after I talked about them, or before I talked about it. So yeah, I talked about taking pilgrimage. Pilgrimage in our tradition is not considered to be something that should be done a lot. It's considered to be a little bit too externally focused if you do it a lot, and it can drain your energy and your finances, which you really should be using to do your practice at home. When I say I used to bring people on pilgrimages to see these sacred sites, it was for the purpose of not taking 2 years off to wander around everywhere just for fun, but to show them the deeper places that the public doesn't know about in India, where you can go in and really have a deepening practice, and that's why I would take people on pilgrimage, and also to meet my teachers and things like that. But anyway, pilgrimage is good once in a while, but we shouldn't really make it a regular thing. It's warned about, actually, it's warned against in a lot of texts like Hatha Yoga Pradipika and so on, because we really should get our energy from our own experience. But so don't move around. I mean, you can stay at a Shaktipitam. That is recommended, but don't move around a lot. Okay. Oops. I don't want to get you seasick. Sorry there, guys. Gabriella, can you talk about symbolism in dream, like animals like cow and monkeys? How to identify the really important symbols in a dream? Well, that's part of the dream yoga teachings, Gabriella. And right now I wanted to stay more on sacred space and the 4-part abhishekams. We can get dream abhishekams. That's true. We can receive empowerments through the dreams. Then we have to understand the symbols. The actual symbol itself does not matter nearly as much. Like if you put a book together, monkey means this, dragon means this, snake means this. It's not useful at all. I say throw those books out the window. There has to be in the context of the person's tradition they're receiving and in their life, because the symbols you receive are a communication between you and essence. Sometimes they come directly through, but then the symbol needs no interpretation. It's quite clear. Okay, anyway, we're going to keep that. Dreaming is something we do in sacred spaces, right? Dream yoga in a sacred space, in a Shaktipitam, is phenomenal. I went to one Shaktipitam called Trambakshwar one time, and there was no rooms available in all the guest houses. So I paid a farmer to stay in his barn like a buck. And I just spread the hay in one of the animal stalls, and I slept all day and all, night. It was my new apartment for the days I was practicing until I could get up into the mountain above. And, it didn't have to be a luxury 5-star. I was just a sadhu. It didn't matter. And I was having phenomenal dream impressions, right? Symbols coming. So Shaktipitam, sacred spaces can do great to increase your dreaming practice. And sometime I might hold an advanced dream yoga training here, especially if we get this space. And then everybody could come and sleep on the deck. So we could have all the teachings there, the practices there, and at night do the dream yoga practice all together with the heads facing the shrine and all the power. That's how I used to practice. That's how I used to sleep when I was single. I always slept on the floor in the shrine room. I rarely used a bed. Magda, Oh, wow, indeed. Europe has plenty of power vectors. Same India. True. Kate, what is the ideal dollar amount that you would like to raise for the structure? What materials are you planning on using? Is it easy to build in Costa Rica? Are there many municipal requirements? Isn't there a site they go to see all that? Okay, Suki just added the link into the chat box so everybody can see if you want to donate, how much we're going for and what it's going to be allotted to. And you can see some videos of the land before we cleared up the vegetation. It's kind of hard to see the land. It's all overgrown with big banana trees and vegetation right now. But anyway, we have that there so you can see that, okay? Is it easy to build in Costa Rica? Yeah, we can build. There's a lot of requirements, but we can build. It's no problem. We're sitting inside a Costa Rican place. It's just the paperwork, right? Elodie, Timo. Hi, Timo. Is there any object or maybe a specific puja that can make a grave more peaceful? The thing that make a grave more peaceful, well, you want a right positioning of the grave. This is something that Westerners don't usually think of ahead of time because, you know, we have the leftovers of Christian idea. We're just going to go in the ground and rot. Someday Jesus is going to raise up our meatloaf body into a primordial, ever perfect body. We're going to walk around the planet Earth forever in immortality. But in the other traditions, the way you die and how your body's handled afterwards has a lot of impact on on your development after death. So a lot of time is spent picking the right grave site for view and for energy and all that kind of stuff. So Timo, if your mother's already buried, you have to do the best you can with that area. And then you have to, you can do purification ceremonies just like you would do on a big area, just right on that grave area. And then put some statues of some deities, maybe empower the deities. Just try to give some kind, because your mother was open to all this, which is great. So you can just give some kind of object that would be a standard resonator for her there. So some kind of statue might be nice. Other than that, there's nothing really designated. See, in the ancient world, you didn't go in and fix up bad grave sites. You know, we have to do that now because we have limited area and we didn't always choose the area, whatnot. But in the old times, you made a grave site that was really right and really good. I don't mean from Jewish, Christian, or Muslim tradition, but from the Eastern traditions where they understood this connection better, or even the pre-Christian European tradition that I'm part of, and all of us who are white were a part of at one point in our ancestry. They have the understanding of how to take care of graves, how to have a proper grave, and so on. So anyway, in this you just do the best you can with purification rituals and visit it regularly for the first year or two. You know, that's about all you can do there. Christoph, so sleeping in the shrine room is A-okay. These past weeks, it has been more and more difficult staying away from my shrine. And you want to sleep in there. I completely understand that. I really do. There's phases of my life where I could not sleep around the shrine room. I had to be around the shrine room. I had to sleep in there. And when I did my long retreat, it was in one room anyway. So it was 12 by 12 room. So I'm in there, sleeping in there, doing practice in there all day, all night, whatever. And I only had a little garden that opened out into a very small, maybe 15-foot by 10-foot garden area with a huge wall all the way around it. So no one could see and I couldn't see out. So that was my world. So I slept with the shrine there as well. So I understand that impulse and I think it's quite okay. So I think it's very good for us. It gives us that empowerment. Yeah. I think that's all the questions for today, right? Okay, everybody. Have a lovely day. It was nice to share that teaching with you. And we hope to live it here. Come down here and have those 4 empowerments. All the best. Sarva Mangalam.